Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's reading by students from the UC Santa Barbara Student Veterans Writing Workshop. My name is Susan Derwin, and I'm the director of the Interdisciplinary Humanities Center and a professor of German and Comparative Literature. Today's event is sponsored by the Harry Gervets Memorial Endowment and is part of the IHC's Living Democracy series. The series explores the forces and conditions that imperil democracy and the political, social, and cultural interventions needed to make democracy equitable, vibrant, and just. This is our last series event of the year and a fitting way to close our exploration of the lived experiences of democracy. I would like now to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of the land upon which the Interdisciplinary Humanities Center is located, and to pay respect to elders, past and present. I first taught the writing workshop in 2011. My goal in creating the workshop was to provide a space in which the student veterans could compose stories about their military experiences and share them with others. Since 2011, I've offered the course at least once, usually twice, and occasionally 3 times a year. But I almost stopped teaching it when the pandemic hit. I almost stopped because writing a story that produces a piece of emotional truth is very demanding. It requires interest in going inward, courage to strip away illusions and defenses, and an ability to reflect coolly upon the truth that reveals itself. And if a writer succeeds in reaching the emotional sweet spot of the story, he or she must then find the right words in which to communicate it and use those words with intention. And the writer must also develop a sense of literary form and pacing, because good writing, like music, has rhythm. When we went to remote teaching, I had my doubts about whether the workshop could succeed. Given the turmoil and uncertainty in the world, I didn't know if over Zoom, the class could establish the degree of trust and sense of community necessary to do this difficult yet delicate work of writing. But despite my hesitation, I went ahead and offered the class several times during the pandemic. And as I think you will see, the students persevered and highly succeeded in doing the work. We are going to hear today from 4 of these students. We will play a recording of their readings, which will run for about 20 minutes. The students will then join me to take questions from the audience members. And you can ask your questions and make your comments through the Q&A function on your screen at any time during the event. And I encourage you to engage in this way with our writers. And now allow me to present our UCSB student veteran writers.
Hello, my name is Nick Tash. I am a current reservist in the Army, and before starting school, I was active in the Marines. I graduated UCSB last spring in 2010 with a bachelor's in philosophy. And this is my story. It's called The Mental Challenges. In September of 2010, I shipped off to Marine Corps basic training in San Diego. I was in the best physical shape of my life as I was a cross-country runner in high school. I was ready for any PT that they would throw at me. However, I was not ready for the mental challenges that came with boot camp. As it turned out, they were far more valuable than I could have ever imagined, and they came from one drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Adamus. Almost immediately, I was under Adamus's spotlight. If there's one thing I hate more than anything else, it's getting in trouble for something out of my control. This was the very situation in which I found myself when I was issued mismatched pieces of my camouflage utility uniform. The trousers were darker than the blouse. Of course, I was not responsible for this, and Adamus knew this, but he still took me aside and chewed me out for this catastrophe. And I still lost my military bearing and yelled back at him that it wasn't my fault. After this exchange, 2 other drill instructors got into my face and screamed at me. I don't remember a word they said, but I do remember being sprayed with saliva. Thomas concluded this episode by telling me, "Tash, you are a fuck up. Every breath you take is a fuck up. Your father shouldn't have left." My dad is the most important man in my life, and it really got to me when Adamus asserted that he had left, even if it was just to rile me. I hated Adamus with everything in my being. I cried in my bed that night, wondering if I would even be able to complete boot camp. The weeks continued, and so did Adamus' verbal attacks, but I was getting more and more used to it, to the point where I was able to laugh a little, only in my head, of course. His favorite nickname for me was Trash, which I thought was too easy, as my name is Tash. I made a joke thinking, okay, if I'm Trash, then you, Adamus, are Staff Sergeant, a dumbass. I found myself thinking similar things throughout the duration of boot camp. I was no longer afraid of Adamus and his insults. However, that didn't stop him from trying to get me to lose my temper. He made his last attempt while I was standing in formation after evening chow on the final week of boot camp. He walked up right next to me and asked about my dad. I responded with, "Mr. Kurt's father lives in Montana and works in public relations, sir." Adamus snarled back, "Hopefully he dies soon, and then you'll die, and this Tash legacy will be done forever." I felt my blood pressure rising in anger, just like the first time he talked smack about my dad. This time, I recognized that he was trying to test me. I responded with a simple, "Aye, aye, sir." It seemed to me that his eyes narrowed in anger because I hadn't lost my temper. He walked away, shaking his head, and I knew I had won. On the night before graduation, I was in the barracks, waiting for the drill instructor's cue to get into bed, or break the racks, as it was called, when Adamus approached me, and I was ready for him. I was now immune to his verbal assaults. But he didn't attack. Instead, he told me, "You've come a long way, Tash. As long as you do what you're told and relax, you'll do fine in the Corps. You'll never quit." This was surprising that he didn't try to one last time to push me over the edge, but I knew it meant one thing, that I had finally earned his respect.
Hi, my name is David Guerrero, and I served in the United States Marine Corps as an infantry rifleman from 2003 to 2007. I'm majoring in sociology, and the title of my story is Kitchen Table. My mother sat across from me at her kitchen table. The kitchen table had always been the location where we talked and shared the things going on in both of our lives. When I was 14 years old, she was sitting at the kitchen table when I shared with her that I had my first girlfriend. "You treat her like you would want me or your sister to be treated," she said. I broke up with that girl the next time I saw her. I blame my mom for that breakup. As a teenager, I didn't want to think of my mom or my sister as a comparison or measurement for my relationship. My mother was the first person whom I told I was going to enlist in the Marines. This time, I was sitting at the kitchen table and she was at the sink, washing the dinner dishes. "Mom, I want you to know that tomorrow I'm signing my enlistment contract." I wanted her to hear the news from me. My mother worked as a housekeeper and managed to raise my brother and me on her modest salary. She had earned the right to be the first to know of the life-altering decision I was making. I'm not asking you to like or approve of my decision, but it would be really great if you supported it, Mom. She did. And situations such as these were the foundation on which we had built a trusting relationship. I could ask or tell her anything, and I knew she wouldn't judge me. I relied on that trust when I asked her for her help with the dilemma I had a week before I left to Iraq. We were both sitting at her kitchen table, and I was going over my pre-enlistment paperwork with her. I had handed over to her my power of attorney. I had named her my sole beneficiary, and I told her that if I were to get killed, the funeral arrangements and all expenses would be covered by the Veterans Affairs, and the military would give her $400,000. As I sat at the table, I knew my mother was the only one who could point me in the direction where I could find the answer to my dilemma. With fear and humility, I asked, "When I die, do you think I'll go to heaven, Mom?" "Of course you will. Why would you question that, David?" "I'm going to war. I'm in the infantry. I'm going to have to kill. One of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not kill." I wasn't afraid of the actual combat. I was concerned that I would not be allowed into heaven for my actions during combat. My mother suggested that I ask my question to the priest from our church. I was skeptical. Here I was, someone who might end up killing people, but who still hoped to get into heaven. Fortunately, the priest turned out to be a former military chaplain. He advised me that murdering someone was a sin, but I was going to war. And in war, we are entitled to defend ourselves. He reminded me that God had gone to war. St. Michael was the leader of God's army during the war against the forces of evil. God had sent St. Michael and his angels to fight against Satan and his evil forces. Your life is going to be in danger, and you have the right to defend yourself in war, David. The priest's words enabled me to feel better about the possible consequences of combat. I felt a peace within. I didn't want to kill, but I was ready if I had to. I didn't hate my future enemy. I did not even know him. My squad's first combat patrol in the city of Ramadi was going to be a foot patrol. We were relieving another squad from an observation post, an old hotel in the center of Ramadi that we had occupied to keep a constant presence. As we were preparing to leave on a mission, Lance Corporal Neerman approached me. Even though Lance Corporal Neerman was the same rank as I, he had arrived at our unit the previous year, so technically he was my senior. But he had never seen combat, so in the eyes of the other Marines, he didn't have the experience to make him a senior. I liked Neerman, and I respected him. He said to me, "You know you're taking the lead on this one, right?" "Yeah," I answered. "No problem. I'm not scared. I'll do it." Clearly, I hit a nerve because he said, "I'm not scared either, fuckface. But at least I've already been in Iraq." As I mapped out a route to Outpost Hotel, he pointed to one spot on the map and said, "Don't go too far south on these streets. That's where a whole squad of Marines was wiped out 2 months ago." As he was speaking, our platoon commander walked into the room and told us the plan had changed. Instead of me, Neerman was going to lead the patrol as point man, since he had been to Iraq before. 3 hours later, we stepped out to begin our foot patrol. Neerman and I locked eyes. Then he smiled and said, "You'll take the lead on the next one, all right?" I responded, "Of course, bro. You know I got you." Neerman never made it to OP Hotel. En route, we were ambushed by the enemy. Neerman was hit by a burst of enemy gunfire. He was transported by Humvee back to our base, where he was medevaced by helicopter to a base hospital and treated for his gunshot wounds. When we finally reached OP Hotel, I learned that Neerman was going to survive. I felt bad for Neerman. Thankfully, my mom had directed me to that priest. I was spiritually prepared for this situation. I knew it wasn't my fault that he had been shot. It was the enemy's. Thanks to the strong bond I had with my mother, I had avoided mortal injury. As the point man for our squad, I was now going to continue to lead our patrols until we left Ramadi, or until, like Neerman, I got shot. 7 months later, our company came home. Neerman was at the parade deck to welcome us back. When we saw each other, we both smiled and hugged. The words, "I'm sorry, bro," came out of my mouth. For what? It's not your fault, idiot. We smiled at each other again, and I told him, "Bro, after you left, we ransacked through all of your shit. We passed around all your DVDs, like it was Black Friday at Blockbuster."
Hello, I am Michael Ramirez, U.S. Air Force veteran and a senior at UC Santa Barbara, currently majoring in stats and data science. I'm here to present my short story, The Kid. The Kid. When I first arrived in Saudi Arabia, I didn't know what to expect. I was fresh out of the Air Force and starting my new job as a private military contractor. Because of my background in aircraft fabrication, I had been hired by the Royal Saudi Air Force to help support their jet fighter program. I had heard rumors from other contractors about how cold and indifferent Saudi Arabia could be, but I was advised by fellow contractors to focus on my job and collecting a paycheck. My life slipped into a steady routine. Each day I would leave my villa on the heavily guarded compound, work my 8-hour shift on the airbase, and return to my villa. The compound had all the amenities I needed: a grocery store, a pool, a gym, and even a small restaurant. So there was no reason for me to venture into the local city. One day, my supervisor, Willie, who had been in the country for a few decades, and I decided to go to the mall. On the way, as we drove slowly through a crowded street, I saw him. He was a small kid, dirty, and dressed in ragged clothing. He looked like a lost puppy. I knew he couldn't be Saudi Arabian because he was wearing an Afghan-style hat. He walked up to our car and knocked on the passenger window. He was begging for money. Willie told me not to give him any, but he didn't say why. However, I decided to give the kid a fistful of reals. So I rolled down my window. As I handed him the money, he looked up, thanked me, and quickly ran back to the corner. Willie grunted, visibly upset. After I rolled up my window, Willie said, "Michael, hope you're happy. You just contributed to human trafficking." Soon after, I saw a van pull up and watched the kid give the Saudi driver all the money he had. Willie told me that human trafficking was common here and that boys were usually tasked with begging for money. Begging was the best case scenario, he said. At first, I didn't believe Willie, but I already knew about the Afghan tea boys, the sex slaves of older men in Afghanistan. But everything made sense once I really thought about it. Why else would an Afghan kid be in this location on the far side of Saudi Arabia? Willie told me that this was the reality of the situation and that most contractors couldn't handle working in the Middle East. I reminded myself that I was only supposed to care about getting the job done and making money. But my stomach still twisted into knots. On the drive back to the compound, I didn't say anything. I was trying to make sense of the world around me. I had heard stories about rape victims being lashed because they left their homes without a male escort, people having their hands chopped off, and the debt slavery of third world workers. But now I could finally connect a face to a story I felt a whirlpool of emotions. I couldn't sort myself out, but I knew I wasn't acting like a contractor. Contractors were supposed to be indifferent professionals who only cared about the money. A few months later, my contract was near its end, and I was given the option to sign up for another year. But I didn't take it. Woolley told me I was an idiot to give up my company-paid housing, my tax-free income, and relatively easy job. He had valid points. But I felt I had to leave. In order for me to keep being a contractor, I needed to kill a small part of myself, like Willie had done. I didn't want to end up like him. When I left Saudi Arabia, I took a lavish holiday in Thailand before returning back to the US. I ate at the best restaurants, stayed at expensive hotels, and spent a good amount of time drinking. While on holiday, I also went out of my way to donate money to charities, give money to those who looked like they needed help, and always made sure to tip the workers well. However, I couldn't escape my feeling of guilt and shame. I had managed to leave the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but I knew a lot of people weren't so lucky. Even after 5 years, I still wonder what happened to that kid. I never tried to think about him for too long. I know happy endings don't exist. Maybe in a different place and under different circumstances, I could have helped out that kid, but in Saudi Arabia, I was just a bystander.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Hickman, and I am a graduating senior here at UC Santa Barbara. My major is biology, and I am excited to share my story with you guys. This is a story about my deployment to Afghanistan. My last day at Baraki Barak. Off in the distance, I heard a distinct sound. The metallic blades cutting through the air. Could this finally be it? Was this really happening? I touched my face to make sure that I wasn't dreaming. I was only 20 years old and was nearing the end of my first deployment. As the helicopter neared, my excitement grew, my heart raced, and my legs and hands were jittery. I couldn't stand still. I had to pace in circles. I could feel the gusts of wind getting more violent and pushing me back. The sound grew louder. Over the hill, I saw a black shadow illuminated by the moonlight. Sand, dust, and particles filled the air. Within seconds, I felt like I was being thrashed around inside a wind tunnel. I didn't care. I embraced the feeling. I ran to board the helicopter. I had just spent 8 months in a remote small outpost in Afghanistan called Baraki Barak. I was with my platoon, and this was my final day. Ever since my arrival at the base, I had felt nothing but misery. We had been assigned to the outpost in order to create a safe space to protect the U.S. forces in the province as they slowly withdrew from the area. This meant that my job was to protect our base and make our presence known. We performed daily patrols to signal to the Taliban that we were in town. During the winter, we had no equipment to keep us warm, so every night it felt like we were inside of a freezer. The cold would creep in, forcing me to wiggle my toes so they wouldn't freeze together. In a desperate attempt to keep my hands warm, I urinated on them, only to realize that the freezing liquid made them even colder. Small red sores were appearing on my hands, the beginning stings of frostbite. In the spring, our only oven broke, and for a month we couldn't replace it. We rationed our food. 1 biscuit for breakfast, 1 biscuit for dinner. Every night I could feel my stomach screaming for food. I placed all of my hope in leaving so I could escape the torment, but the date of departure kept getting pushed further and further back. With each delay, I lost the part of myself and became resigned to the fact that this place was my home. I had to accept this reality. I had to live in the moment. There was no alternative. I couldn't spare the mental power needed to imagine being elsewhere. There was no more daydreaming about getting some R&R on the main base, or starting the day by enjoying a warm, hot shower, or treating myself to an ice cream sundae to cool off in the heat. I tucked those happy thoughts into a box and locked them away. The delays made me feel stupid for hoping this existence could be over. How stupid could I be? I would ask myself. I needed to stop foolishly thinking that the life would ever get better here. I grew sour and bitter. I hated everything and everyone. The air, the people, the missions. I hated myself for ever wanting to join the army. As the helicopter began to take off, the pleasing thoughts that I had locked up slowly returned. I thought about how great it would feel taking a long, hot shower. I wanted to sleep in a nice, proper bed. I felt the bitterness leaving and optimism beginning to seduce me. As we flew over the hill, I looked back one last time at the small outpost, and I said goodbye to the old me.
I'd like now to welcome our 4 student writers to join me on the screen. If you turn on your videos and audio. Great. There you all are. Thank you for reading. Please, audience, send us your questions in the Q&A. And while we're waiting, I think I will start you off with a question. Well, first of all, how'd you like seeing yourselves on the screen? But don't answer that one. I know what you'll say. Here's my question. What did you hate most about writing your stories? And what did you like most about writing your stories? Who wants to start us off? Robert?
Yeah. I think the worst thing is kind of like opening up. David mentioned it before when we were in class. He called it the minefields. It's that thing you don't want to let out because I guess it makes you vulnerable. So that was one thing I didn't like about writing it. And the best thing I liked about it was kind of the realization of like afterwards, like now I can actually see like what happened, what's going on, and process some of the emotions and everything that happened.
For me, I kind of agree. Like the thing I hated the most and liked the most are kind of the same answer. Like I hated going back to that, trying to remember exactly how it was, and at the same time, because I was just not getting screamed at was not one of the fortes of my life. But then like we put it there more better. Like, why did I feel that? Why did I express like that? What was the plan behind that? You do get to a point of some kind of I want to say closure. Let's say closure. You know, you come full circle with it, and the relief that you feel. So yeah, it sucks at first going through it, but then when you complete it and you have it exactly on the paper, what's in your mind, it's a lot better. It's good.
Michael, do you want to say something?
I think it's also being honest with yourself, because you might have an opinion of what happened, but looking back, your whole memory changes what really happened.
Mhm.
The worst thing I hated probably was just having to like linger about these ideas I had for years. I never like went back and actually looked at it. So
Mhm.
just remembering, that's about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I share that with I call them landmines. Whenever you gave a topic, you're like, this is what we're gonna talk about. And it was the first thing that popped in my head, you know, my mom. And but I was like, I don't want to go there. I'm like, shoot, I just stepped on a landmine. Now I have to write about it because I knew if I really wanted to you know, be honest, I had to go within. And that's where the last place I wanted to go. You know, a lot of these stories I you know, I thought to myself, I'm never going to share this with anybody. I'm taking these to the grave with me. And I felt like this class, it was now or never. I'm like, I have to let, what, I don't think I'm ever going to get an opportunity to talk about this anywhere, you know, because I hadn't brought it up anywhere, therapy or anything. So I'm like, I think this is the time. So I had to jump. So that's what I hated the most. And then after, when it's out, it was like a big release, like, okay, now it's, you know, I talked about it at least once, you know, and so that was my process.
Okay, our questions are rolling in. How do you feel about having entered the military? Do any of you have regrets? Do you not have regrets? From this point, looking at this point in your lives and where you've gone, where it's taken you, what's your relationship to that decision to enter?
I think when I first left the military, I kind of hated the idea of me ever joining, but now looking a couple years after, I don't regret joining now at all, because it made me the person who I am today, and all these experiences I would never have had. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted. I would say that where I am now, I wouldn't be here, especially with a lot of the benefits that I'm getting. But I didn't realize with all the benefits and all that stuff is that you don't get it until you're out. You don't see any of that stuff when you're in. So it's sucks when you're in, but when you get out, you can actually reap all the good stuff that you've done. So it's kind of a love-hate thing for me. But I am glad I did that. And I mean, I wouldn't be here where I'm at today. So glad.
Yes, completely agree with that. That question was asked me 2 years or 2.5 years into my service. I would have been like, yeah, I regret. Why did I do this? This was stupid. I'm an idiot. And then when you get out, just like everything comes back, going the GI Bill, the free Veterans Day meals that you get all over the place, like just the little things. And then, the skills are actually, the medical skills are great. So like afterwards you think like, yeah, that was such a great decision. I'm so glad you did it. But during, you're like, what was I thinking? I'm an idiot. So yes.
David, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't regret it. For me, when I graduated high school in 2001, so when the towers came down, I remember that day vividly. And my mother and my father came to this country. They're Mexican immigrants, and my mom became a citizen. And she, just like we talk about benefits, it's crazy how everything comes together. On Monday, she suffered a stroke. And because, she's getting services right now, and she's getting the care from Cottage Hospital that she's getting, and it's because of this country and what it does and how it takes care of its citizens. And I'm more than ever now, I'm proud that I served, that if I was willing to serve this country that's taking care of my mom today and takes care of, my brother and my sister and myself, and it offers me this benefit. So I think more than ever, I'm proud. I'm proud and to have served my country. Yes.
Okay, we have a cluster of questions about the writing process. So we're going to dwell in that space for a little while. First of all, can you talk about how you chose your stories or experiences? Did you consider several choices, or was one first topic in mind from the beginning? And I should just tell our audience, and this is related to another question, that the way the course works is that each week the writers are given a prompt and they write from the prompt. They always have the option to leave it if there's some other idea that they want to pursue, but generally they tend to pursue the prompt. So the first question is, did you write about the first thing that came to your mind, or were you making choices about what to write about? Anybody want to take that? Yeah. All right.
I went with well, there was other stories that popped up, but like I was saying, is some stuff I didn't want to go into because it was a bit uncomfortable for me, and I just felt uncomfortable writing about it. So I chose the one story that I had the most, kind of like spoke to me the most and had the most vivid, like strong emotional connection to it, because I could write about it rather than something that happened that I didn't feel was significant. So I wrote the stories that I wrote were significant to me.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts about that?
I think when I first started writing, I was really shy about what I wrote about. And I spoke to Professor Derwin and all the other veterans. They're kind of like, no, you have a better story here that's set in, and I kind of had to come out, like flesh it out little by little. But it was very impressive, like what I could write out. So even the kid was like, I wrote about just being a contractor and making easy money. Then one little paragraph was about the kid, and it kind of became that story. That's why I left. Looking back, I never knew that's what was a big trigger why I quit Saudi Arabia. So.
How about the editing process? The question is, how open were you regarding the editing process? And I'll just say Nick is smiling, so you're going to go first. I'll just say for our audience that we spend time in the class learning how to help one another edit. So we do a lot of workshopping, and everybody gives input to the other writers. And our goal is not to judge or evaluate according to what you like or don't like, but what's working. How can I clarify my voice? Is my story getting out? So in terms of the editing process, how open were you all to it, Nick?
Probably initially not very open at all, because I would spend ever just writing a story that I think I just nailed. Like, oh, that's awesome. And then they'll go through it, just totally mark it up. Like, what are you really trying to say? And I'm like, I don't know. What are you really trying to say? Oh, damn it. Oh, I guess you gotta do some more searching, see what I'm trying to say. And like, how does it feel? Like, what is that barricade that you're trying to get at? Like, by saying this, like, you say it just in words here, but what's the emotion? What's the feeling behind it? So then when you finish the editing process, it comes out, you see it again. It's like, wow. So that's where that was all coming from. So but yeah, the first part, it's annoying and a little slightly demoralizing to think you just wrote this great thing, but it's not near where it needs to be at the time. But it pays off. It pays off.
How about discussing the impact of writing on your memories? One question is whether being able to express your thoughts, and I would say even construct your memories through writing, but has that process helped you to, the language here from our audience members, move past the memories? Another audience member wants to know whether the writing helped you to organize your confusion, if there was any, about your military experiences. So has writing impacted your relation to your memories, or your sense of your memories? And
yeah, I'd say that it definitely helped me remember certain aspects that I didn't realize, and that kind of came with like the editing process and asking the questions. And even just as I was writing some of the stuff, I kind of entered a place in my brain, mentally thinking about these things where I never really ever, as David was saying, ever like talked about it or like fully kind of gave it too much thought. So as I was doing it, I was able to, the memories started to slowly trickle in, and a bigger picture was coming to be painted.
For me, I remember this specific time where I think I came apologizing for the way I was feeling. I shared a moment where, I came back one of the times I came back from Iraq, and I was at the parade deck, and I wanted to hug my mom, but my wife was there, and my daughter, was there too. And it's such a feeling where I wanted to hug my mom, and I felt bad if I would go past my wife and my daughter, and that moment where you shared, you're like, stop apologizing. You just got back from Iraq. You just went through so many things. It's not normal. So these feelings that I felt like I had to, I apologize because I wasn't normal. It wasn't a normal feeling. And just my whole experience, and my life, I guess, is not normal. So I had to, that moment for me, it helped me to be like, stop trying to fit yourself into a square box. You're a peg, you're not a square. So that's where, for me, that was a moment where it was a breakthrough for me, personally. So, and that was through writing.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges for veterans who are writing, or service members, that there's such a strong impulse to judge rather than to accept what one is experiencing and feeling, and then start to explore it. That judging, that impulse to conform, the conventions that are imposed that we have in society, it's very difficult to suspend those so you can really figure out what you feel and think about things. And I appreciate seeing all of you do that work in order to get to your stories. I want to move now. We have a few more minutes to some questions about kind of content and philosophy that people are asking. Here's one about, it's really a question that obviously pertains to infantry if you're in combat, but it really is a question for all people who enlist. And it is, do you resign yourself to accepting in combat, but also as a service member, do you resign yourself to accepting your death? Do you come to the realization that once you accept death, you have nothing to fear? So do you get over or beyond fear? And if so, or however you manage, does your service to others improve? How do you get your focus in a mission? What are you wrestling with? And the last part of this is in wrestling with these sort of, existential truths. Have you found that there's a positive impact in your civilian life? Has this experience of wrestling with death and the need to accept the possibility of death? What's the impact? How do you do that? Yeah, Robert.
It's kind of a large question, but I didn't really focus too much on the stuff, like to do the mission. I didn't think about death or anything. When I was first in Afghanistan, it was just pretty crazy. So I was a bit fearful of dying for a little bit. And then after I realized that I'm not going to leave here, I just kind of accepted it. It's like, if I'm going to die here, it's whatever. So I didn't really dwell too much on that. I kind of just became numb. I would say that definitely it has improved in the like later on in life, as I am more like appreciative to certain things, because facing that, you can learn what you really appreciate and realize that you missed out on doing stuff and try to live it up. So that's kind of how I dealt with that.
Yeah, for me in combat, at that time, I'm 37 now, so I was 21 years old the first time I went to Iraq. And yeah, at that time, I knew what I had signed up for. I knew it was I was willing to sacrifice my life, and I knew that's why in the story that I shared, I was very clear with my mother what her benefits were going to be if I didn't come back. That you are the power of attorney. Here's my debit card. I won't need it over there. So I was content. I knew it was going to happen. Now, when I was getting shot at, you still have that survivor, fight or flight. You're still going to be scared. It's not like you're like, okay, well, here I am. We in training, you're like, your job is to make the other guy dies for his country. It's not your job to die for yours. It's the other way. So get that in your head. And now, going forward, I think what combat has taught me and how I apply it now to my civilian life, like I've shared with you, I've learned acceptance. Sometimes there's things in life that you don't have to like it. Sometimes we think we have to like everything. We have to, it has to be good and enjoy. You don't. You just have to accept it. And once you learn acceptance in life, I feel like it's the same thing as, you kind of, I don't know. Me personally, I've lived better. And with that understanding for me of acceptance, I can kind of relate that to combat, where you just accept it. You don't have to like it. You just have to accept it. So that's how I can answer that question.
Okay, well, our time is up. I can say to each of you, my students, thank you for allowing me to work with you. And I can say, I think as a member of our country, thank you truly for your service. Thank you, audience, for listening. Come back next year. Go to Instant Separation to read more of our student veterans' writings. Have a wonderful afternoon, and do take the exit survey when you leave our video today, our webinar. So thank you and goodbye.